Every species feared the scale of valor, except the one species that broke it. The whole of audience glowed with a soft violet shimmer as the galaxy's greatest assembly convened. Delegates from 92 starfaring civilizations stood behind their crystalline lecterns. Their eyes some compound, some bioluminescent, some entirely vapor-focused on the colossal device hovering at the chamber's center. The scale of valor. It was older than most empires. A living machine forged by an extinct race that sought to measure the one trait shared by all intelligent life, courage. For millennia, its readings had shaped treaties, military assignments, and diplomacy. The Brackle, with their acid blood and legendary war chants, held the highest rating. The Metherans, pacifists, who dissolved into puddles under stress, held the lowest, and today, for the first time in history, a human stood before the scale. Commander Alya Serrin, wearing a uniform so simple it offended 3 aristocratic species by accident, stepped into the projection circle. She stood straight, chin lifted, eyes steady, though privately she wondered if the room's air tasted like mango or anxiety. Humans were new to the galactic stage, and the Council didn't quite know what to make of them. The test will assess your response to escalating threat scenarios, announced Archon Vesh, a 6-armed elder with a voice like crumpling metal. Do you accept? Alya opened her mouth to answer, but didn't get the chance. A panel on the far wall flickered red. The hologram of a ship surged into view, its hull torn open, engines venting fire into the void. A distress signal echoed across the chamber. Unscheduled emergency, intoned the chamber AI. Starship Heliox reporting imminent reactor collapse. Estimated total loss in 9 minutes. The delegates froze. 9 minutes wasn't enough for a rescue team. Not even a Brackle shock squad would attempt it. Archon Vesh's voice trembled. Commander Serrin, you may remain here. The danger, I'll go, Alya said instantly. Vesh blinked all 6 of his eyes. Do you require details first? The probability of survival doesn't matter, Alya replied. Send me. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Brackle ambassador's mandibles rattled in disbelief. The Mithrians immediately fainted into gelatinous blobs. The scale of valor pulsed, sensing her decision. Its fractal core spun, searching the databanks for a classification. For eons it had quantified heroism with mathematical precision, risk tolerance, threat adaptation, self-preservation thresholds. Yet the moment Alya stepped forward, the device emitted a sharp, confused tone. Symbols cascaded across its display. Error, recalibrating. Error, undefined. Delegates whispered in shock. Is it broken? Someone asked. No, said Archon Vesh in a hushed voice. It simply cannot categorize her. Alya tightened her gloves, oblivious to the geopolitical chaos behind her. Beam me aboard the Heliox. Before anyone could protest, her form dissolved into shimmering light, and the scale began to shake. Commander Alya Serrin rematerialized in a burst of static inside the Heliox's main corridors, in time for the ship to lurch violently beneath her feet. Alarms shrieked like dying animals. The emergency lights flickered red, then plunged the hall into pulses of shadow that stretched across the bulkheads like claw marks. Heliox, this is Commander Serrin, she called out. If anyone's alive, respond. Only the echo of collapsing metal answered. The ship smelled of scorched circuitry and ozone, the kind of scent that meant a reactor was throwing a tantrum in its final seconds. Alya's boots crunched over fallen plating as she made her way forward. Her suit registered microfractures in the hull. Any one of them could rupture fully and suck her into open space. Her pulse quickened it from fear, but the razor clarity that came with it. 8 minutes left. She reached the junction leading to the engineering deck. A fallen support beam blocked the path, still glowing from the heat. Alya planted her hands beneath it, muscles straining. Humans were not the physically strongest species in the galaxy, but they were stubborn. Stubbornness, as it turned out, could function like a superpower. The beam lifted, she ducked under and continued. Commander Sakine, crackled a voice suddenly. Faint. Static list. Izensen Teva. Trapped. Deck 3. Alya exhaled in relief. I hear you. Hold on, Tava. What's your situation? Fire collapsed, bulkhead, reactor breach, alarms. Not good. Deck 3 was dangerously close to engineering and the damaged antimatter core. Alya rerouted, sprinting through another corridor. The floors vibrated with increasing intensity. Each tremor, a countdown drumbeat. As she rounded a corner, a burst pipe expelled superheated vapor. She shielded her face and pushed through, feeling the sting against her suit's outer layer. 7 minutes. She reached the lift, shaft crumpled, useless. The fall plunged nearly 50 meters. but a maintenance ladder spiraled along the inner wall, still intact. "Of course," she muttered. "Why make anything easy?" Hand over hand, she descended. Metal groaned below. Halfway down, another explosion rattled the ship, shaking the ladder violently. Alya lost her grip for half a second, just enough time for her brain to formulate the sentence, "Well, this will suck," before she caught herself again. Her arms trembled, but she kept going. Deck 3 was a smoky disaster. Fires burned in patches along the walls. Sparks cascaded from torn conduits. Amid the chaos, a single figure lay pinned beneath a twisted beam. A young humanoid woman with pale blue skin, Ensign Tava. Her eyes widened as Alya approached. Alya shoved with all the force her muscles could gather, and the beam finally toppled to the side with a metallic scream. Tava gasped as feeling returned to her legs, wincing but still conscious, still alive. "Can you stand?" Alya asked. Tava tried. Her knees buckled. Alya caught her before she fell. "Okay," Alya said. "Modified plan. I carry you." "You can't," Tava protested. "I'm too heavy for." Alya hoisted her over her shoulder in one smooth motion. "You weigh less than my gear during basic training," Alya said. "Let's move." The ship shuddered violently. Overhead, ceiling panels snapped loose and crashed around them. The air grew hotter uncomfortably, unnaturally hot. Radiation alarms in Alya's suit began to blink amber. 5 minutes, maybe less. Alya sprinted down the corridor, navigating flames and collapsing structures with instinctive precision. Humans didn't possess thermal vision, chitin armor, or exosymbiotic reflex enhancers like many galactic species. But they had something else, an ability to make decisions in the midst of chaos, decisions that should have paralyzed them. She rounded a corner, and her suit S-map displayed a cruel truth. The most direct route to the evacuation pods was blocked by structural collapse. Tava looked up weakly. "There's another way. Maintenance crawlspace. Near reactor control." "Near the reactor?" Alya raised an eyebrow. "Great, the scenic route." But it was their only chance. She turned left down a corridor that pulsed with angry red warning lights. Smoke thickened, swirling in ghost-like currents. Tava coughed as Alya lowered her into the narrow crawlspace hatch. Alya followed, pulling the panel closed behind them. Inside, the space was tight, just big enough to crawl. Pipes ran along the walls, pulsing with unstable energy flows. The temperature climbed with every meter. Tava's voice quivered. "Commander, do you ever get scared?" Alya paused, one hand on a blistering hot pipe. She considered the question. "Yeah," she said. "Fear's natural, smart, even tells you what matters." "Then why did the scale say your courage was undefined?" Alya pushed forward again. "Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act in spite of it. Maybe the scale isn't programmed for that kind of choice." They crawled in silence for a moment before the passage opened into a cramped chamber overlooking the reactor core. The sight hit Alya like a punch to the lungs. The antimatter chamber glowed a violent, unstable white, pulsing erratically like a heart ready to burst. Energy arcs snapped across containment rings. Every pulse made the surrounding machinery groan, as though the ship itself were begging for release. "Containment's failing," Tava whispered. "No kidding." Below them, a shattered support column dangled over the core like a broken bone. A control panel flickered nearby, sparking. Tava clutched Alya's arm. "We need to get out, now." Alya studied the readings. The pod bay was... Alya descended the maintenance ladder toward the reactor platform, feeling heat radiate through her suit like the breath of an angry star. The containment chamber pulsed wildly, each surge, lighting the room in blinding white. The ship groaned, metal warped. Time was running out. 3.5 minutes. She reached the central console. Its screen cracked like a spiderweb. Sparks spat from the wiring. The readouts flickered between catastrophic warnings. "Okay, Heliox," Alya muttered. "Show me what you've got left." Her fingers flew across the controls. Structural integrity. Critical. Cooling grid. Offline. Magnetic containment. Failing. The system offered automated repair protocols, but each required more power than the dying ship could supply. In short, impossible. Alya cracked her knuckles. "Guess we're improvising." She pulled open a side panel and ripped out a cluster of fiber conduits, exposing the raw neural wiring beneath. The ship AI hissed in protest through the speakers. "Warning, unauthorized manual override." Yeah, Alya said, rewiring the conduits. "You got a better idea." The AI paused. "No." While she worked, distant metal clanged, the echo of the ship breaking apart, piece by piece. The temperature climbed further, beads of sweat forming under Alya's helmet. Her hands shook from the heat, but she forced them steady. She glanced up at the core. A nightmare of unstable antimatter. A single miscalculation would rip the entire vessel apart in a flash brighter than a sun. Her wrist display chimed. 3 minutes. Alya swallowed. She connected 2 conduits that should never be connected. The reactor screamed, its brightness flaring. For a moment she thought it would explode immediately. But then the numbers stabilized. That's right, Alya whispered. Work with me. She knelt beneath the console, prying open a coolant junction. A blast of scorched air hit her. She coughed, nearly choking, but continued. She redirected what minimal coolant remained to the core's upper containment loop, by in seconds, maybe a minute. Then her suit alarm blared. Radiation levels exceeding safe limits. Tell me something I don't know. She grumbled. Her vision wavered. She blinked it clear. Half a minute of work left. Maybe less. A voice crackled in her calm. Commander Serrin, Tava's voice breathless, panicked. I made it to the pods. Please tell me you're right behind me. Alya hesitated. The truth stuck in her throat like a shard of ice. Tava, you have to launch the pod. No, I can't just leave. You can, and you will. Alya twisted a final conduit into place. Lights flickered. The reactor's pulse slowed, but didn't calm. If I fail, you need to survive to report what happened. But the council, they sent you alone. This isn't about the council, Alya said softly. It's about you living. So go. There was silence, soft breathing, then a broken whisper. Thank you. The channel cut out. Alya exhaled shakily. The room vibrated more violently now. The core was entering its death throes. She approached the manual calibration lever, 4-foot steel bar built for emergency realignment. Her suit flashed another countdown to minutes. Alya tightened her grip. This is gonna hurt. She pulled. The lever didn't budge. She braced her legs, teeth gritted, and pulled again. Metal groaned beneath her weight. Her shoulders screamed. The reactor roared in her ears. Finally, the lever shifted a few precious degrees. Containment readings flickered upward. Not enough. Alya's breath trembled. She gave a humorless laugh. Fine. Last chance. She threw her entire weight into one final, desperate heave. The lever slammed into place. The reactor shrieked. The containment rings flared, and then something happened the heliox hadn't done since the accident began. It stabilized. The light dimmed. The vibrations eased. The core, once ready to explode, now hummed with precarious balance. Alya collapsed to one knee, panting. Relief flooded her. Right before her suit beeped urgently. Life support critical. Radiation, exhaustion, heat. Her body was failing, but the ship was saved. Alya tried to stand and the world tilted. Her vision blurred. Then she collapsed beside the console. 1 minute until total system shutdown. Darkness crept in. For a moment, Alya drifted in a haze, weightless, suspended somewhere between consciousness and the dark. The world came back in fragments, alarms fading into silence. The reactor's frantic pulse settling into a calm hum, the metallic floor cool against her cheek. Her suit flickered weakly. Life support failure imminent. Alya blinked, trying to focus. She attempted to push herself upright, but her limbs felt like sandbags soaked in lead. Every muscle throbbed. Radiation poisoning gnawed at her nerves, burning and freezing them at the same time. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Still alive. Barely. Somewhere above, the hull creaked. The reactor's stabilization had bought the ship time, but the vessel was still crippled. If rescue didn't come soon, the heliox might simply bleed out its oxygen and die quietly. Alya tilted her head toward the ceiling. Tava, I hope you launched that pod, she whispered. The comms were dead. Her voice vanished into the empty air. For the first time since arriving, isolation hit her fully. The heliox was a tomb waiting to happen unless the council realized she had actually succeeded and dispatched a retrieval team. But Alya knew the truth. The council would have assumed failure within minutes. No species would expect anyone, not even themselves, to survive a reactor on the edge of annihilation. And maybe that's why the scale of valor had broken. Humans didn't calculate risk like others. They didn't pause. They didn't weigh probabilities. They saw danger, catastrophic, suicidal danger, and ran toward it if someone needed help. Alya wasn't proud of that. She wasn't ashamed of it either. It was simply what she did. She forced herself to sit up. Pain knifed through her ribs, but she managed to brace against the console. The reactor's readout glowed softly. Stable for now. She allowed herself a small smile. Score 1 for improvisation. A faint clatter echoed from the corridor. Alya froze. For a heartbeat she wondered if her mind was playing tricks. Hallucinations were common when radiation spiked past safe limits. But then she heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, hesitant, growing louder. Someone or something was on the heliox with her. Alya reached instinctively for her sidearm. She gripped it but couldn't lift it. Her arm shook too violently. The weapon clattered to the floor. The footsteps approached the threshold of the reactor room. Alya's pulse surged. She squinted through blurry vision. A shadow stepped through the doorway, tall, with elongated limbs and a silver X. For a moment she thought it was an enemy scavenger or an opportunistic raider. But then the silhouette raised its hands in a universal sign of peace. And a familiar voice, ragged but alive, echoed through her helmet. "Commander, it's me." Alya's breath hitched. "Tava." The young ensign stumbled toward her, bruised and pale but moving under her own strength. "You told me to launch the pod," Tava said, kneeling beside her, "but I couldn't leave you behind. I rerouted emergency power to restart a short-range transponder." The council picked it up. Alya blinked. "Rescue is coming." Tava nodded, tears streaking through grime. "They're minutes away." Alya sagged in relief, but Tava's expression shifted, fear creeping into her eyes. "Commander, when the council hears what you did, they won't believe it. The scale already broke once." She swallowed. "They might think you're dangerous." Alya smirked faintly. "Good. Maybe they'll stop asking for volunteers." The ship trembled gently as something massive latched onto the whole rescue craft docking. Voices filtered through the corridor. Lights grew brighter. Alya's vision dimmed again, but this time she wasn't afraid. She'd saved a ship. She'd saved a crew. She'd given the galaxy something it didn't know existed. A kind of courage that couldn't be measured. Alya whispered one last thought before darkness took her undefined. "Makes sense." Alya drifted in and out of consciousness as medics carried her through the docking bay. Voices echoed like distant thunder. Lights smeared into blurry halos, and every movement sent spears of pain through her muscles. She felt the cool kiss of antiseptic spray, the pressure of stabilizing foam, the faint buzz of field-healing nanites. But none of it felt real until she heard a familiar gasp. "Commander." Tava burst into view wrapped in a thermal blanket, an oxygen mask dangling around her neck, her exosuit still scorched from the explosion. She shoved past the medics and grabbed Alya's hand, her own trembling. "You're alive," Tava whispered. "I thought you." Alya managed a weak smile. "Too stubborn to die." Medics checked Alya's vitals. Radiation exposure was severe but treatable. Internal injuries could be mended. Her consciousness stabilized. Her breathing deepened, and warmth seeped back into her limbs. But when she fully awoke again, she found herself in a stark, circular chamber, white walls, silver panels, and a hovering device in the center. A council evaluation room. Tava sat beside her, worry etched into every line of her face. "They want you to take the scale again," she said quietly. "To understand what happened." Alya snorted. "Understand? It broke. End of story." Tava shook her head. "They think the reading wasn't an error. They think humans might have a different category of courage." Before Alya could respond, the door slid open. High Chancellor Verental, insectoid with shimmering emerald plates, entered, with two counselors following closely. Each carried a gravitas that weighed the air down. Veren inclined his head. "Commander Alya Serrin, you stabilized a reactor every simulation deemed unrecoverable. You acted with no regard for your own survival. You ignored all measurable risk." His multifaceted eyes gleamed. "We must determine why." Alya raised a tired eyebrow. "Maybe because someone needed help." The Chancellor gestured toward the hovering device. "The scale of valor. Please extend your hand." Alya sighed. "This again." She pressed her palm to the sensor. The device hummed soft at first, then louder, rising in a crescendo of confused mechanical tones. Lights flickered. The core pulsed. The entire machine shook like a creature trying to understand something beyond its comprehension. The counselors exchanged alarmed glances. The display flashed. Value undefined, then category unclassifiable, then concept out of range. And finally, the scale shattered not by explosion, but by collapsing into itself, fragments dissolving like particles losing meaning. The chamber fell silent. Chancellor Veron stared at the empty air where the device had been. "Remarkable," he whispered. Alya shrugged. "Guess you need a new toy." Tava couldn't help a small, awed laugh. Veron turned to the counselors. "Record this. Human courage does not operate within the parameters we understand. It is not instinct, not calculation, not programmed response." He looked at Alya. "It is choice. Pure, volatile, unpredictable choice." Alya met his gaze. "Courage isn't about not fearing. It's about acting while terrified." Veron bowed slightly. "Then we have much to learn from your kind." Tava leaned closer, her voice soft. "Commander, you changed everything." Alya closed her eyes briefly, letting the words settle like warm light across her chest. "I didn't change anything," she murmured. I just did what anyone should, Verone responded gently. And that is precisely why it cannot be measured. Alya opened her eyes, meeting them all with quiet resolve. Then stop measuring it, she said. Start trusting it. The council chamber fell into thoughtful silence. For the first time in galactic history, courage had defied definition, not through algorithms or categories, but through the simple, stubborn act of a human choosing to do what was right. And somewhere deep in the ship that had nearly become her tomb, the repaired reactor hummed steadily alive, balanced and stable, just like the woman who had saved it.